Hi, I'm Jonah Comstock, editor-in-chief at Pharma Forum. I'm here at Reuters Pharma USA in Philadelphia with Craig Ackerman, a partner at the Alexander Group. Thanks for joining me, Craig.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about the Alexander Group and what you guys do.
At Alexander Group, we are go-to-market consultants, so we help with the commercial organization, everything from what is commercial strategy all the way down to how do you pay your people.
So this event is really bread and butter for you guys.
It is. It's a great event.
And you specialize in the pharma industry.
I lead up our life sciences practice, so that includes pharma and biotech.
Great. So what have you heard so far at the event in terms of trends and insights?
AI. So everywhere you go, you hear about AI these days. The other one's launch. I mean, launch is the lifeblood of the industry. So if you're not launching new therapeutics, you're probably going to go out of business at some point. So, the biotech market's coming back for what I call the COVID winter. We're seeing more funding there, which means more M&A activity for the big pharma. So it's becoming a much more vibrant market, going back to where it was before COVID.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was hearing at JPM, and I think that has kind of played out a bit in the months since we have seen some deals that worth talking about.
It was like middle of last year, everything just got much brighter. All of a sudden, everything was just rosy again. I mean, maybe not rosy, but everything was. I think people were just through with we had COVID, then we had high interest rates, which kind of stymied a little bit of, went from overfunding just because of all the funding for biotechs and research around COVID vaccines and diagnostics to then interest rates went up. So funding got cut for smaller biotechs and everyone kind of, is conserving cash to a more normalized environment now where biotechs are getting funded, more therapeutics are being launched, and thus we're seeing more M&A activity because the top 40 or so pharma companies, they're buying up a lot of biotechs or licensing their
Right.
products, right? So the ecosystem is a lot healthier than it was just a few years ago.
You said everybody's talking about launch, right?
Yeah.
I mean, AI, it makes sense that we talk about it at these conferences because it's a new area, it's innovating, everything's changing. You might think that like launch is launch, right? We've been launching pharma products for decades. How much is there to talk about every year? But how is that, how is that changing? And what are folks talking about in terms of like responding to those changes?
It's really not that it's changing, it's just the different types of therapeutics on the market. So more rare disease products, more autoimmune disease therapeutics out there. There are more complex drugs that are coming to market, so thus more complex launches. It used to be just for a big sales force ad. It got physicians to write scripts as fast as possible, and that was about it. Now it's more tempered because there's fewer patients for many of these therapeutics. All of a sudden, we're having to think through launch. Where do we put our people? We have scarce resources, especially at launch. What types of other resources, like or patient support programs, do we need on top of it? Reimbursement support, case management, nurse educators, things like that. So it's really more about an evolution. There's when you initially launch, and I'm going to talk about this today. Then the evolution as your therapeutic and your portfolio matures, the types of roles and what you do changes. So there's a lot of different models out there. It's just saying which model is correct for my specific launch.
Got it. Because it's also a game of edges, right? Like every marginal thing you can do better with your launch and make a little more money is,
hmm
is pretty impactful and meaningful in pharma.
Well, not only the money, but for the patients, right? If I can make more meaningful impact on my patients, I can get more patients on therapy faster as well. And that's what kind of drives the industry and drives a lot of people who run it. How do we make as an industry people's lives better?
Um, are there any particular areas that you advise in where you see things changing a lot, like GLP-1s or
And there's the GLP-1 craze, which is I saw, I think, Lilly got downgraded today because I think it's, the markets think it's a little hype, but it's been pretty crazy when you look at the GLP-1s and the roller coaster, the ride we've been on, and now the direct to consumer. That's kind of probably one of the most interesting points outside of we now have a way to combat obesity. We now also we're seeing the emergence of more and more direct to consumer, largely spurred on by GLP-1s. And I think that's going to become a bigger trend over time, especially with all the pressure on the PBMs. Right?
yeah.
How do you bypass PBMs? So we can go direct to consumer. Not all therapeutics, not all drugs are going to be a fit for that, but there's certainly going to be a market for by using more consumer-oriented services to get your therapeutics.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned rare disease up top in terms of what some of the big topics and launches, and with obesity, you have sort of like the most common disease, and then
Mhm.
you have these rare conditions, and so I can see that like those would probably vastly different considerations when it comes to commercialization and launch.
And you have cell and gene therapy in there too, which is very complex. So it's really about the complexity and who you're calling on.
Yeah.
And 75% of the therapeutics out there are now classified as specialty. So with a lot of focus on oncology as well as rare disease and then autoimmune diseases. So those are generally complex molecules, complex action, very expensive, and very complex to administer to the patient.
What would you say is the biggest takeaway from what you've heard at this meeting, or the biggest takeaway you want folks to walk away with?
I'll go back to AI since it's always in the press. It seems like sitting through enough sessions, AI is still experimental, right? We're still kind of in the pilot stage. And so my biggest takeaway is nobody has a silver bullet, but people are using AI. And that's my message is you have to start using AI now and then learn how to use it, harness it over time. But be cautionary of just another tool because especially in the commercial model, analogy to CRM, when CRM came out, reps never used it, right? So you could put some AI tools in place. If reps don't use it, you don't get your money out of it and it has no benefit to you. So make sure whatever you put in place that your commercial teams actually use.
Get that adoption and
Yep.
really integrate it into your workflows.
Yes.
Yeah, it's key, but it's often overlooked, right?
Right. I mean, there's the there's almost the land of tools that never get used, right? How much money companies spend on the latest software agent tool, right? Whatever term we want. They just basically sit on the shelf, pay all this money to deploy them, and we don't get much out of that.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with me, Craig.
Yep. Thank
Really
you.
interesting perspective, and yeah, I really appreciated the
Okay.
conversation.
Thank you.